In the dark shadows of the criminal underworld, the 18th Street Gang is known for its brutality, bloodshed, and history of violent crimes.
The city is targeting the 18th Street Gang because it is one of the nation's largest and fastest-growing gangs.
In this video, we will showcase the stories of some of the gang's deadliest hitmen, criminals who hide in the darkness to commit crimes that will send chills down your spine, and cold-blooded killers with no remorse. Join us on this special episode as we explore the secret life and brutal ending of the 18th Street Gang's deadliest hitmen. Genesis of the 18th Street Gang. In the late 1960s, a group of Mexican Americans and other young immigrants came together to form a street gang, after facing rejection from several established Hispanic gangs. These young men, originally part of the Clanton 14, proposed a separate clique which would be known as Clanton 18th Street, and welcomed all immigrants with open arms. This proposal was rejected by the Clanton 14, but the young men did it anyway, naming their new gang the 18th Street Gang, holding no affiliation with their parent gang. Due to this history of sedition, the two opposing groups have been engaged in a bitter war ever since, a war that has claimed more lives than necessary. Although their history dates back to the 1960s, the gang took on its new form around the 1980s. To expand their influence, the 18th Street opened their gates wide to not just Hispanic immigrants, but people from all nationalities and races, although they were made up largely of second-generation Hispanics. This led to the creation of one of the first multiracial and multi-ethnic gangs in Los Angeles. Before this new era of gang membership came along, most groups like these tend to only allow membership for people of the same ethnic group and background. But the 18th Street became known for their diversity, and it is one of the reasons they're still prominent till today. As the gang emerged, they became embroiled in a bitter war with the more established Hispanic gangs, leading to cases of drive-bys and mass shootings, and leaving the people in constant fear. Over the years, the 18th Street has grown into about 200 separate independent gangs, operating under the same name within separate barrios in the San Fernando Valley. They're especially prominent in North Hollywood, the San Gabriel Valley, South Bay, East Los Angeles, and several other parts of the city. The gang has grown to become one of the most notorious gangs operating out of Los Angeles, and have been on the FBI's radar for a number of years now, with hundreds of arrests being made every single year. Beyond the shores of the United States, the gang has also taken on a Central American identity, with its activities extending to nations like El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, earning them a reputation as one of the most violent gangs in Central America. Their base in these countries were established by members who got arrested in the United States and were deported back to their home countries. In a bid to spread the reach of the gang, these members would then recruit new members, growing into an out-of-control movement that terrorized both the old and young. Due to the extent of their operations, a bloody war soon emerged between the 18th Street Gang and another gang known as the MS-13, as each of them vie for the top spot in Central America. This has grown to become the deadliest gang war the region has ever seen. Barrio 18's criminal activities. The most lucrative business run by the 18th Street Gang is the street-level distribution of illegal drugs, and they currently maintain a strong hold on this industry, both in the United States and in Central America. The gang is responsible for a large percentage of hard drugs that end up on the streets of Los Angeles, and their network seems to grow as the years go by. Apart from the drug trade, the gang has also been involved in cases of auto theft, carjacking, drive-by shootings, extortion, identification fraud, robbery, assault, and a host of other violent crimes. According to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the 18th Street Gang are one of the most prolific street gangs in Los Angeles, with hands in every illegal activity you can think of. They exert their dominance with brute force, extortion, and intimidation, and they're never afraid to shoot first and ask questions later. The gang's activity is so frequent that it is estimated that at least one person is robbed or assaulted by an 18th Streeter in Los Angeles County every single day. The level of violence these guys are capable of will chill you to the bones. We're talking kill counts 3 times that of other active street gangs. They've even reached a level of sophistication and organization that other gangs can only dream of, making them tactically superior. Within the ranks of the 18th Street Gang, you will find some of the most ruthless hitmen in the game, cold-blooded killers whose presence alone strikes fear. These messengers of death leave a trail of bloodshed and tears in their wake, and while some of them have either landed in prison or in a morgue, others are still very active till today. These are their stories. Rocky Lee Glover. In the world of criminal gangs, the name Rocky Lee Glover evokes fear and trepidation. It was Glover, along with other subordinates, who initiated the creation of this criminal gang back in the day, and he's recognized as one of the most dangerous hitmen of the 18th Street Gang. From orchestrating attacks, kidnappings, and robberies, to going on the field himself and igniting chaos and destruction, Glover has etched his name in the history books as a prolific criminal. However, the crime that sent him to the slammers took place in the wee hours of September 18, 1980. Michael Mitchell and his wife Dora were in their apartment at 2727 South Budlong on that day, not knowing they were about to become victims of a brutal attack. At around 4 a.m., Dora and Michael heard shots being fired in their neighborhood, and by instinct, Michael went out straight to check what was going on and offer help in case anyone needed it. His wife, Dora, on the other hand, went into the bathroom to change her clothes, but as she came out, Dora found her husband lying on the floor, with crimson red everywhere. He had been fatally hit by a long-distance gunshot to the head, and the perpetrator was none other than Rocky Lee Glover himself. As soon as the police responded to the scene, they found several bullets that would later match the weapon used in the crime, scattered across the street from where Michael was shot. About a month after the shooting, on October 24, 1980, Glover was arrested for the murder of Michael Mitchell, and a .32 caliber revolver was found carefully concealed in his home. Ballistic reports later linked this same gun with the fatal bullets that took Michael's life. As the trial began, the facts of the case also emerged. For one, it was revealed that Michael was not the primary target. According to the shooter's brother, Glover had actually planned to kill a man named George Salcido, who was the resident manager of the apartment building where the victim was shot. Apparently, the motivation for the shooting was that Salcido was a member of the Los Harpies West Side gang, and that he was behind another shooting that had taken place around September 6, leading to the death of 3 18th Streeters. So this was essentially a reprisal attack. Unfortunately for Glover, the event marked the end of his prominence in the organized crime scene. By the time the smoke cleared on the trial, he was slammed with a life sentence and shipped off to prison where he will spend the rest of his life. Now, at 62, Glover has kept away from the gang politics in prison and has chosen to stay on the low. But as horrific as Glover's crimes were, this next hitman takes things to a whole new level. Jordan Ryan Moreno. On November 29, 2019, 23-year-old Jordan Ryan Moreno and 3 other gang members carried out one of the most horrific attacks tied to the 18th Street Gang. Their victim, 19-year-old Sara Gutierrez Villatoro, was condemned to death just because of unconfirmed information that she was forming an alliance with the rival MS-13 gang. As the story goes, Sara was the girlfriend of one of the gang members, who began to suspect that she was cheating on him with a member of the rival gang. In the world of street gangs, aligning yourself with a rival gang is like a death sentence, as gangs like 18th Street are known to deal heavily with anyone who turns their backs on them. Shockingly, it was Sara's own boyfriend who made the damning call to her, asking her to come around so he could show her something. Along with Moreno and 3 other guys, Sara was driven from DC to Dickerson, and after going deep into the woods, Sara was forced out of the car. In that moment, she knew what was about to happen. but it's hard to determine whether she was guilty of the accusations or not. Sarah was shot twice with a .38 caliber revolver, and her body was left in the woods. Shortly after the shooting, the police were alerted to the suspicious activity, and that was when they discovered Sarah lying lifeless in the middle of nowhere. The other 3 gang members involved in the shooting were Jonathan Rivera Escobar, Giovanni Dominguez Escobar, and Rigoberto Machado. It didn't take long for the 4 men to be caught by the police, and a highly publicized trial was soon underway. At the end of the day, Jordan Moreno pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to 50 years in prison. As for 18-year-old Rigoberto Machado, who's also known as Crazy, he also pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to 50 years in prison as well. 22-year-old Jonathan Rivera Escobar and Giovanni Dominguez. Escobar also bagged the same sentence of 50 years, although Giovanni had some extra federal charges leveled against him. All 4 men are currently languishing behind bars, where they will be for a very, very long time. Katarino Gonzalez Jr. It took less than 3 hours for a jury to announce the verdict for Katarino Gonzalez Jr. on that fateful day in 1998, handing him a life sentence for his horrific crimes. Gonzalez's crimes involve the shooting of an on-duty police officer in a revenge attack that shocked the community. It all started on April 1st, 1998, when officers Filbert Cuesta and his partner, Gary Copeland, both of whom were members of a special gang unit, participated in the arrest of Katarino Gonzalez for possession of hard drugs. This arrest led to Gonzalez's conviction, and he was subsequently sentenced to probation, as well as a term in county jail. As part of the terms of his probation, Gonzalez was prohibited from associating with other gang members, among other requirements. Instead of retreating into a low-key lifestyle after getting out of jail again, Gonzalez became even more confrontational with the police, especially the 2 officers who sent him to jail the last time. On August 3, 1998, Officer Gary Copeland found Gonzalez while violating the terms of his probation by drinking in public, and he placed him under arrest again. However, this incident didn't exactly lead to serious consequences, as Gonzalez was just taken to the station, cited, and released right back. But when Officer Copeland refused him a drive back home, Gonzalez became visibly upset, calling Copeland unprintable names. The following day, the officer was on patrol when he observed a freshly painted gang graffiti that indicated a target had been placed on his back, and that Gonzalez was planning to retaliate and possibly kill a police officer. On August 8, Copeland called Officer Cuesta, informing him about the graffiti, and in response, Copeland stated that he believed the threat was enough grounds to revoke Gonzalez's probation and send him right back to prison. That same night, the hitman and a couple of gang members were seen attending a wedding reception on Carlin Street uninvited, where Gonzalez was seen showing a gun to some girls. Shortly after midnight, officers Cuesta and his other partner Richard Gabaldon also spoke about the graffiti, and while patrolling, they noticed some gang members going into the same wedding reception, so they stopped to investigate. At about this same time, Gonzalez and some other gang members left the party through the back gate, so the officers couldn't identify him there. The 2 officers spoke to the person in charge of the party, Maria Guzman, who complained extensively about the uninvited guests and how she just wanted the party to end. The officers then left the party, pretending to leave but instead driving around the block and parking at the intersection of Duray and Carlin Streets, 3 buildings away from the party. This was where things took a dark turn. As Officer Gabaldon was getting out of the car, he heard a total of 12 to 15 shots fired from behind him, and just as he slid back into his seat for safety, he heard Officer Cuesta yelling very loudly before slumping forward with a huge gunshot wound on his head. Officer Cuesta took his last breath on the spot, and it seemed the shooter had spotted them outside, circled round the block, and shot them from the back. 2 eyewitnesses saw the shooting unfold, and they were able to identify the shooter as Gonzalez. But upon his arrest on August 11, 1998, Gonzalez admitted he was at the party, but denied ever shooting the officers. He claimed he jumped the fence and ran away upon seeing the officers. before ending up at his sister's home. He would later admit to shooting the officers, but claimed he only did it so he could avoid arrest for going against his probation. Following a highly publicized but very short trial, Gonzalez was slammed with life without parole for the murder of Officer Cuesta, 25 to life for illegal use of a firearm, 15 years for the attempted murder of Officer Gabaldon, and an extra 20 years to life for using a firearm in the murder attempt. The shooting of Officer Cuesta and subsequent sentencing of the perpetrator is a bold example of the ongoing war between law enforcement and the street gangs of Los Angeles. But just when you think you've seen the worst of the 18th Street gang, they stoop to a new low. The 1993 Westlake apartment fire. 1993 was one of the hottest years of gang activities in Los Angeles, especially involving the 18th Street gang. Over 1,000 murders recorded and countless kidnappings and forced disappearances, but the most unforgettable attack was the apartment fire that totally altered the landscape of the downtown LA. On May 3, 1993, an unforgiving blaze engulfed a 40-unit, 3-story apartment building located on the 300 block of South Burlington. The building was home to poor immigrants from Central America and suffered from serious overcrowding. As the fire tore through the building, desperate residents formed human chains in an attempt to reach safety, while others climbed down using bed sheets tied together. Others jumped from the balconies just to get away from the smoke and blaze, sustaining serious damage on landing. Some mothers were forced to save their babies by throwing them out the window and hoping someone on the ground would catch them. Luckily, many of them were caught with little to no injuries. But not everyone was so lucky. One of the victims was a pregnant woman who was nearly full term at the time the fire broke out. She tragically passed away from smoke inhalation, but the baby was rescued by a swift cesarean section. 2 pregnant women lost their lives in the blaze, along with 7 children and 1 adult, while 40 others sustained varying degrees of injuries. The nature of the incident and the horrific scenes that unfolded on that day remain etched in the minds of the residents and the brave firefighters who saved many lives. As officers started digging to trace the source of the attack, all fingers pointed to 2 gang members, Rogelio Andrade and Alan Lobos. However, the charges against them couldn't stick due to lack of evidence, so they were discharged and acquitted in 1999, and for many years, the case remained unsolved. That was until 2017, 24 years after the fire, when officers arrested 43-year-old Ramiro Alberto Valerio and 41-year-old Joseph Alberto Monge for their role in starting the fire. A third suspect, identified as Johanna Lopez, had initially been arrested in 2011, and prosecutors filed capital murder charges against all 3 suspects. Not surprisingly, all 3 individuals were members of the 18th Street gang, and although there were rumors in 1993 that the fire was started by the gang, it was only confirmed following the 2017 arrests. As the trial progressed, it was revealed that Valerio ordered the attack, and that there was a 4th suspect who had fled the country. The main target of the attack was the building manager, who had gotten so tired of the drug trade going on in the apartment that she called the cops on the gang members, forcing many of them out of the building. So in revenge, they set fire to the building, leading to the deadliest apartment fire in Los Angeles history. In 2022, Valerio was found guilty of 10 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of first-degree murder of a human fetus, and was subsequently sentenced to life in prison. But that's not where the story ends. In January 2024, a former 18th Street gang leader named Juan Moreno was pulled out of witness protection to stand trial for starting the fire. He was charged with 12 counts of murder and was held without bail. Back in the early 90s, Romero was the leader of the Lil Psychos division of the 18th Street gang, which means he was primarily in charge of the drug trade around the Westlake neighborhood. His trial is currently ongoing, and there's a chance he might be going away for life when he's finally convicted. Yankee Misael Cruz Mateo. October 24, 2017, 18th Street gang member Misael Cruz Mateo lured another gang member identified as Jonathan Figueroa into a plot to take his life, in one of the most shocking murders linked to the criminal gang. Cruz Mateo was a major member of the 18th Street gang, and one of their most violent hitmen. So when it was time to take care of a rat within their ranks, he was chosen to carry out the task. This rat was 20-year-old Jonathan Figueroa, a member who had committed the unpardonable sin of cooperating with law enforcement. If there's any rule street gangs take seriously, it's that snitches get stitches, and it's even worse when the snitch in question is ratting them out to the cops. That was how Figueroa's fate was decided, and he was meant to be used as an example to other would-be informants. So around late evening, on that fateful day, Cruz Mateo tricked Figueroa into traveling with him from Queens to Kingston, New York. Upon their arrival in Kingston, the two were greeted by other 18 streeters and associates, and by then it was well into the early hours of October 25, 2017. The men then brought the unsuspecting Figueroa to Turkey Point State Forest, where he was repeatedly stabbed a staggering 100 times before they buried him in a makeshift grave. Cruz Mateo's order was that the execution be recorded, capturing multiple gang members taking turns to stab Figueroa, and by the time they were done, he was unrecognizable. His throat had been slashed, his ear amputated, and his body was dragged and disgraced. Because of the graphic nature of the video, we will not display it for you, but the perpetrators in the video made it very clear that the victim was being punished for being a rat. After the brutal assignment had been carried out, Cruz Mateo forwarded the video to other 18th Street members as a warning not to disrespect the gang or cooperate with cops. The video would eventually be discovered by the authorities before the victim's body was eventually located by the FBI in February 2018. But then again, the story doesn't end there. On February 2nd, 2018, Cruz Mateo committed another grievous crime with the fatal shooting of a 20-year-old gang member identified as Blanco Hernandez. The reason for the hit was because 18th Street gang members suspected he was a member of their bitter rivals, the MS-13 gang. He was shot 3 times, and his body was dumped on a residential street before officers arrived on the scene. Following the incident, Cruz Mateo fled the area before he was eventually caught after leading the FBI on a statewide manhunt. On March 27, 2024, Cruz Mateo pleaded guilty to racketeering conspiracy charges for his role in the 2017 murder and the 2018 shooting. For these crimes, Cruz Mateo faces a possible life sentence as he nears the brutal ending of his hitman career. Pedro Espinosa. March 2, 2008. A 17-year-old Los Angeles high school football player identified as Jamiel Shaw. The second was fatally shot by 2 Hispanic men while returning home from the Beverly Center. Although he made it to the hospital, he eventually died from his injuries. Prior to his death, Shaw was a very athletic student who excelled in several sports, including football, basketball, and baseball. He also ran the track, played the piano so well, and was generally considered a promising talent. On the morning of his murder, he had just participated in a rigorous weekend training program to prepare him for college football and a possible career in the NFL. In the early evening of March 2nd, Shaw was walking from the bus stop when his father, Jamiel Sr., called him on the phone. He stopped to answer the call just 3 blocks away from his home, unknown to him that he was watched by some strange men. At about 8:40 p.m., 2 Hispanic men jumped out of a white car, confronted Shaw, and asked him what gang he belonged to. When he didn't answer quickly enough, they shot him. Shaw's father was close by when heard the gunshot, and as he ran outside, he found his son slumped on the ground, and he held him in his arms until medical personnel arrived. Sadly, Shaw was pronounced dead at the hospital at about 9:55 p.m. Upon inspecting the wounds, investigators determined that he was first shot in the stomach at close range, and as he tried to crawl away, the shooter followed him and pointed the gun at his face. As Shaw covered his face with his hands, the shooter fired the final shot that sealed his fate, before disappearing into the darkness. The incident broke the community, as Shaw was known as a bright star, who actually didn't have any gang affiliation. It didn't take long for the white car used by the shooters to be identified, and one of the Hispanic men, 18th Street gang member Pedro Espinosa, was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. His conviction came on May 9, 2012, and due to the special circumstances surrounding the case, he was sentenced to death on May 23, 2012. What made the whole case more controversial was the fact Espinosa was an illegal immigrant who had just been released from jail, so naturally, it sparked debates about Los Angeles' status as a sanctuary city. Espinosa, the man behind the whole debacle, is currently on death row, awaiting the day of his execution. Juan Pablo Murillo. Back in 2010, two 18th Street gang members found themselves in deep trouble after a shootout in MacArthur Park. The incident takes us back to September 15, when gang members Juan Pablo Murillo, Giovanni Macedo, and Guadalupe Torres Rangel attacked a vendor at the park for failing to pay rent. During the confrontations, the men opened fire and started shooting everywhere. A 23-day-old baby named Luis Garcia was being pushed in a stroller by his mother at the time, and he was unfortunately hit by a stray bullet. Although the infant was rushed to the California Medical Center, he took his final breath 30 minutes later. The death of the baby instantly made headline news, causing a massive uproar against the criminal gangsters responsible for the shooting. The police also sped up their investigations, and before long Murillo, Macedo, and Rangel were in handcuffs, thrust into the unforgiving arms of justice. Murillo, who was the gang's second-in-command, was slammed with life without parole, as well as an extra 114 years to life imprisonment. 42-year-old Rangel was also sentenced to life without parole, plus 107 years to life in prison. The admitted shooter, 22-year-old Giovanni Macedo, was sentenced to life. Due to Murillo's status as a major figure in the gang, his arrest and conviction sent a message to the street gang that no one was above the law, from the top leaders to the henchmen. Casualties of war. In March 2016, the bodies of 8 electrical company employees and 3 farmers were found hacked up and filled with bullets near a field in the Juan Opico municipality of El Salvador. These victims were not gang members, but ordinary civilians caught in the middle of the bloody gang war between the 18th Street Gang and the MS-13. At first, everyone thought the MS-13 was responsible for the attack. After all, both gangs were known for their elaborate tattoos and affinity for violent crimes. However, it turned out the whole thing was planned and orchestrated by the 18th Street Gang, who have successfully turned Central America's Northern Triangle into the region with the highest homicide rate in the world. The war between the two hit a peak in 2012, and things got so bad that El Salvador was recording an average of 4 murders per day. For an area that's the size of Massachusetts, those figures are quite alarming. But even after a truce, brokered by the Catholic Church and the El Salvadoran government, the gang still went back to their murderous ways in no time. Now, the government has stopped handling the situation with kids' gloves, and they've been cracking down on these violent gangs and throwing them in prisons in large numbers. But even with the mass imprisonment, the war between MS-13 and the 18th Street Gang continues filling the streets of El Salvador with bodies, and they've even extended their operations to Guatemala and Honduras. Will these criminal gangs ever be totally crushed by the government, though? That remains to be seen. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.